You buy a plane. Then you find out there's ADs not complied with and a list of squawks that are unaddressed. But did you get a good pre-buy done? Let's talk about it in the hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Wong.
And I'm Dan Milliken. In the Hangar is sponsored by Gold Seal, iFly GPS, and Wingfield Aviation.
Prebuys.
Prebuys. We're talking prebuys today in the Hangar, Christy.
Today with us is John Efinger, an In the Hangar favorite.
And In the Hangar favorite, not only that, he's been servicing my 210 for a very long time. John, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
If I had a 210, I would also go see John.
But you have a Piper.
I do. I've got a Piper Warrior.
John, would you work on a Piper?
Not right now.
He is the
I would
Cessna
work on
guy.
a Piper if I worked on Pipers.
But your name.
And I have worked on Pipers.
But your name is Cessna John Efinger, so
Yeah.
you know it's appropriate that it's Cessna's. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I wound up buying a Cessna for my first airplane. And my background, I've worked on military aircraft, and I've done production and manufacturing end of it, and mostly turbines starting out. So when I bought my first airplane, it was a Cessna, and I just, like anything else, I wanted to learn about it, and I just did it part-time, and eventually it turned into full-time.
Let's start with prebuys.
Okay.
First of all, let's define what a prebuy is. What is a prebuy?
Well, a pre-buy is just an evaluation of the basic airplane. There is no specific guideline to go by for a pre-buy, so you're really only relying on the experience of the individual that's doing that pre-purchase inspection. You're relying on their background, and that's about it, really, because anybody could tell you that's a good airplane, and we get airplanes in a lot of times, and they've been through very poor maintenance programs, and then all of a sudden the pre-purchase comes in, and the owner unknowingly sees a lot of maintenance that's been neglected on their airplane. And since there is no standard for a pre-purchase, you may not be getting a real evaluation of that airplane when it's said and done.
So really what it boils down to is it's an evaluation of the airplane before a potential owner buys it.
It should be an evaluation of the airplane, and you should have pretty good knowledge that that airplane that you're buying is what it's supposed to be advertised as. Another area is the appraisal value, and a pre-buy versus appraisal value are two different things. So getting an appraisal is a good idea when you have an expensive airplane. Something else I see, if you're buying a Cessna 152 or a Cessna 172, you don't want to spend $1,000 or $1,500 for a pre-purchase inspection. And normally those aircraft get neglected because there's a limit to how much time somebody could spend on that airplane. And that goes hand in hand with the expensive airplanes. The more thorough your pre-purchase, the better idea you're going to have the condition of the airplane and its value.
Do you find with owners that they've searched, they've gone through maybe months? I'm speaking for a friend. They've gone through months of looking for an airplane. They finally find the one they want. It meets all their needs. It meets their mission. They haggle with the owner. They get it down to the steel that they want. And so they've got it. Now they bring you in or somebody to inspect it who then says, oh, no, don't buy. Do you find that owners are like so dead set, they've already had their heart on it, that they have filters, they have glasses on that say, I'm going to buy this no matter what you say?
Well, that's one of the things I hate about a pre-buy.
Okay.
Because you have a guy in there that's excited about this airplane. He finally found it. He's got all this money in his pocket that he wants to spend. And then you got a guy that wants to take all that money and get out from underneath that airplane. And then I'm caught in the middle, and I'm telling him, you really don't want this airplane because this is going to cost you a lot of money. So no matter what, you're the bad guy. And even the guy that wanted to spend all his money that can't spend his money, now he's upset because he can't spend his money. So you're kind of in a catch-22 when you get in those situations. And
Well, I know that we talked after I bought my plane. I wish we'd used you for the pre-buy. I didn't know you at that point. We talked on the phone, and you were going to be our mechanic, but I'd actually never met you at that point. And my other partner was the one that arranged everything, and he just got somebody local. I wish I'd phoned you out. But you told me later that had you done the pre-buy, you would have given me a do not buy recommendation.
I worked on that airplane for quite a few years.
Right, before.
And that's another thing. You have to know what that individual is looking for.
Yeah.
It helps to know if they're looking for an airplane they're not going to have to do any maintenance on. The paint, the interior, the avionics, the engine condition. There's so many factors, and you could skip some of those steps and plan to take it out in bites. And there's sometimes you don't want to, skip any steps, and you just want a complete airplane that you could fly. And it may be advertised that way, but it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to get until you look at it.
To add on top of that, what are some of the major things that you look at when doing a pre-buy?
The number one thing I look at is corrosion. That's the very first thing. If you've got an airplane full of corrosion, it doesn't matter how nice, and I see this a lot of times, they see all the new glass panel. And my question is, why did you spend that money on this airplane? And you could find a nice corrosion-free airplane. It's just like auto restoration. The better example you could get to start from, the more money you're going to save in the long run. And so corrosion is probably my number one issue. And then after that, the mechanicals. If the mechanicals are good, it's worth putting the avionics in that airplane. So I guess that would be probably some of the priorities I'm looking at.
Okay.
I don't care about the paint.
You don't care about
I
the
don't
paint?
care about the paint. You could fix blemishes, you could fix paint. And
You can fix ugly.
yeah.
Oh, Lola's not that ugly.
Oh, no, Lola. I'm not talking about Lola. Not at all.
Okay, who can do a pre-buy? Can a potential buyer do a pre-buy, or does it have to be an A&P?
No, there's actually no rules for a pre-buy.
Wow.
It's not like an annual inspection. You have to have a license to do an annual inspection. You have to have an IA authorization to do an annual. So you don't need any special ratings. And there's plenty of owners that really, if they've owned the same model airplane for 30 years or 20 years, and they've owned 2 or 3 of them, they could do their own evaluation of that airplane. And again, it's not an annual inspection, and there's no regulation to what consists of a pre-purchase evaluation. And I take that with the individual. I say, what are your concerns? What are you most interested in? And what do you expect when we get done here? You could get a pre-purchase done in half a day, in 4 hours, with enough confidence that, to make your purchase based on your own knowledge of that airplane.
Okay. How much would you say an average pre-buy is?
For me, I'd say it's close to the cost, almost the cost of an annual inspection. And again, you're relying on experience. So I'm going to stop working at my hourly rate to give you 40 years of experience to tell you to make this multi-$100,000 purchase. So you've got to stop what you're doing. You're not going to do it for the same rate as your hourly rate. That would probably, it's going to vary. It's going to vary completely on the individual and their background and their time, and if they got to move you in and put a hold on everything else of the rest of their work going on.
I just, because I've only done one pre-buy inspection before, and that was on the Warrior. And we got a thorough one. It was like $800. And we were essentially handed a list of things that they found. Not that there was anything that was wrong with it. Our big thing was airworthiness items. Is there anything unairworthy about the airplane? And there wasn't anything. But they basically just said, all right, here's the facts. Now it's up to you.
Well, and I see that list coming from the pre-buy person is a tool used in the final bartering. Here comes the pre-buy inspection. Oh, there's an AD that's just on the horizon that's going to cost the new owner $10,000. So can you take that out of the purchase price? I mean, I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see that. And then another question I get asked on those lines is, am I better off doing an annual or just a pre-purchase? Well, an annual, you have to do, well, you should be doing all this extra service work. You know, having your wheel bearings greased and replacing a bad wheel bearing is pretty cheap. And so a pre-buy evaluation, that's what your concern should be. Do I have a crankshaft that's bad and I have to pull my engine prematurely? Do I have AD on my cylinders? And that's what we got into
That's what
on
I
your
had in
airplane.
mind, yeah.
you
But we
know.
knew, because at least we did get a pre-buy, and they alerted us to the fact that our cylinders were within the AD. And so we knew that we had, I think, like 300 hours before that AD hit. So we didn't get the full price of a top overhaul, knocked off the purchase price, but we got a portion of it.
Right. And that's what you want to make sure. You want to make sure that all the heavy hit items are taken care of. And we've discussed before on the previous episode, avionics. And not all avionics work is the same. And you may have an airplane that has all the glass panels and all the buttons you push and everything lights up, but you look behind that instrument panel and, it's a spark away from a fire.
Oh, my.
And you've got 30 years of 3 upgrades done to that airplane, and they left all the wiring behind, and you'll see connectors and bare wire and cutoff wire with bare ends hanging every place, and you don't know what any of that's going to. So pre-purchase is really recommended, and it doesn't have to be an annual for that reasoning, because you could address the expensive items up front.
But maybe if the plane's 10 months into its last annual, maybe it would be a good thing but the owner, of course, would have to do that.
And then there's also no guarantees pre-purchase or even the annual inspection when you're buying an airplane, because there could be internal engine issues, and corrosion is the big one that we see, especially with the big Continentals like your airplane has in the turbos. They're advertised 300 hours, since major overhaul. Well, 25 years ago. So
it's been sitting.
If that airplane was sitting someplace in Deer Valley, Arizona, you may get away with that. If that airplane was sitting on the coast, on the East Coast somewhere, or the West Coast, you're probably only going to get 100 hours till you start developing issues with that engine. And there's some signs that you can see in advance in a pre-buy evaluation. There's some that you just can't. I've pulled a lot of engines. I've got several in the shop right now. And it isn't until you get to the very last lifter of the engine doing the evaluation to know that you've got to pull the motor. And that's another thing about pre-buys. How much is that owner going to allow you to investigate that airplane? Most owners are not going to let you take their engine apart,
we want you to just say yes
engine.
so that we can spend that big money in our pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another problem I have is if I am doing a lifter evaluation and I tell the owners, and it's not at a pre-buy, because they're just going to go to the next guy. They're not going to let you take their engine apart. That's just too much disassembly. But when you take it apart as a mechanic and you find that there's engine troubles, you can't just put the parts back in and make believe it didn't happen. So you've got to embrace that ahead of time and know that this may or may not be a good deal.
Interesting. All right. Anything else that you would add? Any advice that you would give future buyers out there regarding a pre-buy?
I would just say get somebody that's familiar with the make and model airplane, whatever that make and model airplane is. Damage history. That's another big issue you run across. Some damage history, especially with the retract models that we're kind of familiar with, it's good and it could be bad. You could have a beautiful paint job on horrible workmanship, and I've done pre-buys before in retractable gear up aircraft that had a gear up repair, and the owner was unaware of the workmanship, that they perform when they put the airplane back together, and then they're afraid to fly it back home. So, if it's got structural damage, you don't want to have somebody look at that airplane that doesn't understand structures and airframes and damage history. So the more experience that you have for the person doing your evaluation, the better off you are on an expensive airplane.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you just got to figure out how much you could afford to lose on a gamble, and then factor that into what you want to do on your pre-purchase.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think the takeaway message from this is if you're thinking of buying an airplane, definitely expend the money to get that pre-buy. It could cost you thousands in the end. What do you look for in a pre-buy? Leave your comments below. And of course, like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.